What's going on, guys? I am Kadarius Washington, and y'all are checking out the Sports Rundown. And let's talk some college football today. We didn't get to do this yesterday because I was making my NFL season predictions, but let's talk college football. So, one of the big stories in college football and one of the big stories in sports from this past weekend was Arch Manning in his season debut against Ohio State, where Texas lost 14-7, and Arch Manning struggled in the game. Arch Manning threw 17 for 30, 170 yards, even though most of those yards came in the fourth quarter, a touchdown, and an interception. But in turn two, the Ohio State quarterback, Julian Sayin, didn't really have that much better of a game himself, throwing for 13 for 20, 126 yards, and a touchdown. But as far as Arch Manning is concerned, I noticed that there were some people who were already writing him off and already calling him overrated and saying that he wasn't worth the hype. And I'm just going to say this. For all of y'all who are ready to call Arch Manning overrated and ready to write him off and all of that, I just have two words I need to say to y'all. Calm down. This was the first game of the season against the reigning national champion Ohio State in the shoe. Beating Ohio State in their own house against a defense as talented as we saw on Saturday is a tough ask for anyone, whether it's the first game of the season or any game of the season. Now listen, it is insane how much pressure and hype that has been put on Arch simply because of his last name and, of course, his father, his uncles, and his grandfather's history in football. And just because he didn't look good in the first game of the year, people are already ready to write him off and call him overrated. Now listen, folks, I think Arch is going to be fine. I wasn't one of those people who was ready to give Arch the Heisman Trophy and say that he's absolutely going to be the number one pick in the draft, because remember, Arch before Saturday had only had 2 starts in his collegiate career. But aside from that, I think he's going to be fine. But I do know this. The eyes of the college football world are going to be on that San Jose State game coming on Saturday, and that's a 12 noon game on ABC. Because if Arch Manning struggles in that game as well, then we are really going to have a conversation there. But I'll tell you someone who had a worse outing this weekend in college football, and that was Alabama. Alabama got absolutely smoked by unranked Florida State, 31-17, and even I think that score was closer than the game actually was. I mean, Alabama really fell from an 8 in the AP poll to I think 21st the last time I saw. Now look, here's my take on Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer is a great coach, but he's just not an SEC coach in my eyes. His coaching style might work in the Big Ten, and it has, but it's just not working in the SEC right now. And obviously, the SEC is a complete step up in weight class compared to the Big Ten. I mean, this is why we herald the SEC the best conference in all of college football. Because in the Big Ten, the only teams you really have to worry about are Michigan and Ohio State. They're the big boys in the Big Ten. And to a lesser extent, Oregon and Penn State. But in the SEC, you have to worry about Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, South Carolina, who's really good this year, Texas, and even Vanderbilt, who beat them last year, and Auburn in the Iron Bowl at the last game of the regular season. Auburn would love nothing more than to put Alabama's behinds in the ground, whether the Tigers have something to play for or not. As a matter of fact, I'll even give you this. Here is Alabama's schedule from October 18th through November 15th. These are the 4 games in that stretch for Alabama. Tennessee, at South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma. Can you see this Alabama team going 4-0 in that stretch? Listen, folks, Kalen DeBoer was great at Washington. He obviously led them to the national championship game a couple of years ago before taking the job at Alabama, which, I mean, you can't blame him because there's more money there, and it was arguably the best job in all of college sports. And we knew that setting Nick Saban-like expectations for Kalen DeBoer, especially starting out, was going to be unrealistic. I mean, Nick Saban is the greatest coach to ever stand on a sideline in college football. And when you coach at Alabama, where Nick Saban and Bear Bryant managed those sidelines, those are some really big shoes to fill. And so far, it just hasn't happened yet. And from the way things are going, I don't even think it's going to happen. Because Kalen DeBoer is just not the kind of coach that I would describe as an SEC coach. But here's a coach who had an even worse showing than Kalen DeBoer. And that, folks, was Jordan Hudson's boyfriend. I mean, my goodness, that was an absolute beatdown on Monday night from TCU against North Carolina. And at first, things looked a little promising for North Carolina as they scored a touchdown on their opening drive. But do y'all know what happened next after that opening drive? TCU busted out the belts and put up 41 unanswered points. UNC gave up 48 points in that game overall, the most points allowed ever by a Bill Belichick coach team. I mean, TCU went straight belt to backside on the Tar Heels. And on top of that, Gio Lopez, the transfer starting quarterback, went 2 hours. There was a graphic on the screen during the game. 2 hours without competing a single pass. I mean, Michael Jordan, Mia Hamm, Lawrence Taylor, pretty much everybody except the actual team showed up at the game. I mean, when you have Michael Jordan leaving the game before it's actually over, and when you had Kirk Herbstreit's dog calling the game in the last 2 minutes, that, folks, is a serious problem. And don't even get me started on the whole thing with the balloons at the press conference looking like it was some sort of baby shower. But in turn, credit TCU. I mean, literally almost no one outside of TCU in that area was talking about them before the game. And to quote that Michael Jordan Last Dance meme, they took it personally. They took it personally against the Tar Heels, and they went absolutely belt to backside. And as a matter of fact, I think TCU might have just scored another touchdown. I think so. I think they just scored again. But anyway, let me give you, while I'm at it, let me give you some games to watch here as we enter into week 2 of college football. So as I just stated, San Jose State and Texas, that's going to be a game where the eyes of the college football world is going to be on. Now, listen, there's a good chance that this game is probably going to be over by halftime. But, of course, the story in that game is how will Arch Manning look in that game and how will he bounce back from that clunker of a performance in week 1. The rest of the games, really not that strong of a college football card, of course, compared to last week anyway. There's only one matchup that's against ranked teams this week, and that's 15-ranked Michigan going up against 18-ranked Oklahoma. That's going to be the Saturday night game on ABC. And that's the game where College Game Day, they're going to be on the side of that game. So I think that's going to be a pretty fun game to watch, a good Big Ten against SEC battle. And then you've got the annual Cy-Hawk game at 12 noon on Fox, Iowa against Iowa State. And then the 3:30 game, the SEC, excuse me. The SEC game of the week on ABC, you got 20-ranked Ole Miss against Kentucky. And you know what? Just for kicks, I'm going to give you Alabama against Louisiana Monroe. Now, listen, we know the story in 2007. I think that was Nick Saban's first year at Alabama. The Crimson Tide went up against Louisiana Monroe, and they lost, if you can believe that. And I always have the memory. I always think about that, too, whenever I see Alabama and Louisiana Monroe on the schedule to play each other. So I'm going to give you that game to watch, just for the fun of it. Just for the fun of it. Like, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell to be notified of when I post again, and also follow me on Twitter and on Bluesky at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports, and I will see y'all the next time. Peace.